What does it really take to grow, modernize, and lead in an industry that is constantly evolving? Well, I am Monica Adwani, entrepreneur, insurance, and innovation leader, and someone who believes that transformation isn't something we talked about, it is something we built. On Transcend with M, we sit down with leaders shaping the future of the insurance industry, founders, executives, and operators navigating growth, complexity, and change. They're not just success stories, they're real conversations about structure, resilience, leadership, and the decisions that strengthen businesses from the inside out. Because the future of insurance demands more than growth, it demands readiness. This is Transcend with M, where we rise, modernize, and lead with purpose. So, thank you, David, for being here. And I appreciate, you not only as a good friend, but also as an amazing mentor out there, directly or indirectly for a lot of people. So, folks, David and I were just chatting online, and we thought that this information should be on the podcast. So, we're talking about how the industry is changing and how we have to move into becoming more advisors than anything else. So, David, share away.
Yeah, we do. And I mean, I think that the thing that's really changed more than anything else, if you're a producer specific, it doesn't matter what you're producing. It could be personal lines, small commercial, middle market. It's not a horribly difficult job, but it's not an easy job either. Anybody has the ability to do it. And I think that's what makes it really cool. But few are very successful at it because of the amount of work that it actually takes to take yourself out of that average level where most people fall and get into that top tier. And we're at a point right now where everybody's running around AI this, AI that, to the point I just want to backhand anybody who says AI to me because I'm so sick and tired of hearing about it. But it's a necessary evil at this point. And I think that if you're somebody who's in a production role, you're not as susceptible to get replaced by AI as what maybe a CSR that's just doing repetitive tasks that can be replaced by AI would be. But I think that the savvy producers that understand how to leverage the tools that we have right now are going to make it much easier for them to separate themselves from the pack. And a lot of it has to do with just understanding the framework in how you should operate going after accounts before you ever even reach out to them as a prospect. For example, years ago, when I started 20 years ago, I would spend, I don't know, depending on the size of the opportunity, an hour or two researching, going really, really deep. Now I can go into deep research on Claude or Chat GPT or one of these other LLMs, and it's going to spit out way more information than I was ever going to find hunting and pecking on the internet. And it does it in about 10 minutes. So I think that's a really good use of AI for producers right now, specifically just to be able to help them with the research piece. But, I take it a step further because you can do a lot to prepare for a new business appointment inside of some of the LLMs. One of the things that I tell everybody to do, and we're going to come out of the box hot, Monica, I'm going to give you the good stuff right out of the box.
I'm waiting. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Yeah, one of the things I tell them is put yourself in a position to predict the questions you're going to be asked, right? So I think a lot of newer producers go into their first few meetings, maybe the first two dozen meetings, and they've never had to present to a CFO or even just have a fact-finding meeting with the CFO of a company before. So it's weird for them and it can be very intimidating. So one of the things we talk about is go in and set the framework for who you're going to meet with inside of a prompt, whether you're using Chat GPT or your preferred method, but just say, I'm an insurance producer in the middle market. I'm meeting with the CFO of a manufacturing company that manufactures X product that does, $100 million a year in sales. They have 250 employees, and just give it like a history of who you're going to meet with and everything. Mm-hmm. And then prompt it to say, what are the questions you're actually going to prompt it to say that you're going to meet with the CFO and say, what are the questions I should ask to get the most out of our time together to understand their operations without coming across as trying to sell them insurance. And it's going to spit out a list of questions that are actually probably pretty much in line with things that I inherently know to ask because I've been doing it for so long, but I didn't have that tool when I started. But then the secret sauce we talk about that's not going to be a secret anymore after we put this out is now you put yourself in the role of the CFO, right? So go back, use the same general demographics of the business, but say, I'm the CFO of a manufacturing company that manufactures this. I'm evaluating new insurance and risk management representation, and I'm meeting with an agent today. What are the questions as a CFO I should be asking to make sure I'm covering my bases? And now you can reasonably get about 75 to 80% of the questions out of the way and know how you're going to answer them before you ever walk in the door. That's a completely different world than the one we came from. Like, that wasn't even an option. That wasn't on the table ever. And I had to struggle through it, and I had to be quick on my feet. And those are things I think that helped me be successful ultimately. But that's a tool that's at everybody's fingertips. And this is the thing that just blows my mind. The overwhelming majority of producers will still not go use that tool to prepare for the meeting, no matter how easy it is.
It is
because
true.
They have been conditioned to get payrolls by class code, projections for sales, a statement of values, whatever it takes to quote the insurance, and they completely ignore what's really driving rate, which is all of the operational issues or the missing programs that they have on the HR side or whatever else. And if anything else, I think that if you are a mediocre producer today, but you're motivated, you can use some of the AI that's available right now to instantly elevate your game. There's no question.
Yeah. And now the other side of that, right? It's not that it's not being leveraged to the level that it should be, right? Because now for us, it's more competition, right? We have to go in there. But the one thing I do believe that still will set us apart, right? You and I, and that a lot of people still need to learn, even though all that information is still out there, that you can utilize these tools, that you can appear to be smarter, is the relationship building. And I see a huge gap right now in the new generation, the new producers coming up, not having that warmth, right? That communication skill to get that conversation going. Anyone can ask questions, but how do you train yourself to the objection that's coming that you didn't see that they were going to have? Or, how do you react in order to gain that trust quicker if you're coming in hot and they didn't like it, right? Like, how that communication comes into play, it's the biggest differentiator. And I feel like, yes, you're absolutely right, to say about how to utilize and leverage those tools, but I still feel that a lot of people still not utilize it efficiently, even to learn how to communicate.
Yeah, I agree. AI is not going to teach you soft skills. Like, you're
Right.
not going to learn relationship building and retention strategies and things like that. It'll get you to the table and it'll keep you at the table. But what gets you into ultimately gets you the account and keeps you in the account is the relationships that you build. And you build that literally one meeting at a time. Nobody just walks in, here, give a couple of scoops of this, add water, here's instant relationship. That doesn't happen. It happens over time, but the most fundamental and basic way to explain it is the way that I've used to explain what I did for a living to my kids when they were younger. When they'd say, Daddy, what do you do at work all day? Daddy gets paid to make friends. That's really what it boils down to. We have to be competent technically. We have to be relatively personal. We have to be trustworthy in order to gain trust. But ultimately, we're really just trying to make friends and build relationships so that we can bring business into the agency and keep it here once we have it. Now, as far as the objections and all of that go, you only get better with that stuff with at bats. You can try to predict, and that's one of the things that we do when we have it prompt an LLM to try and gain the questions a CFO may ask. But getting objections, you really have a hard time knowing exactly how this person thinks until you've met with them. So that's when I start to rely more on some of the tactics that you learn in Never Split the Difference with Chris Voss and some of the other things that I've read, where I think so many times people will come out with an objection and it's like we're frozen and we don't know what to say, when in reality, we just need a little bit more time to think through what our answer is going to be. So a great way to do that is when somebody throws up an objection is just to mirror them. repeat the last 3 or 4 words they said to you. Do it with an inquisitive inflection in your voice, and they're going to take more time to explain that objection, and it's buying you more time to come up with the answer that you want to come up with. But if somebody says, look, David, I'm giving you this time today, but I am really too busy to have this meeting. Too busy to have the meeting? Yeah, I know I booked it 2 weeks ago, and then they're just going to go in and tell you everything that they have going on. And most of the time, you're going to find gold in that answer. And it's really, really important that you acknowledge you heard what they said. Just so if somebody says, I've got payroll due today, I've got this, I've got that. Sounds like you're really busy. Feels like you probably could use some help. And you're showing empathy by acknowledging that they're busy, that they're overworked. And in their mind, they're thinking, okay, this guy gets it. He's going to make this as painless as possible. Let's just finish having the conversation. Da-da-da-da-da-da. It's usually never about not knowing how to overcome the objection. It's getting caught off guard by the objection and not knowing how to buy yourself more time in the conversation to actually come up with the answer. That's one thing. The other thing is, again, I've been doing this 20 years. I got a laundry list of ways to overcome objections when people throw them at me, because I've pretty much had everything but the kitchen sink thrown at me at this point in my career. So if somebody says, oh, my friend's my agent, or my fraternity brother's my agent, or whatever else, I'm usually going to flip the script on them and say something that hits them right between the eyes. So if I know that you're paying $100,000 a year and your experience mod's a 1.5 before I ever walk in the door, and you're now paying $150,000 a year because your manual is 100, and you tell me your friend's an agent, I'm going to sit there and I'm just going to take a deep breath and I'm going to say, wow, I got to tell you, I'm impressed, because I don't have a single friend in my contact list that I would consider to be a $50,000 friend. And you're holding on to this friendship and paying $50,000 more a year than the average peer in your industry because of that. And then they look at you like you're the one with the eyeball in the middle of the forehead. Would it be crazy for me to suggest something to you that would solve this problem for all of us? And then they're all ears. Well, let me ask you a question. Let me break down the numbers for you. On $150,000 in workers' comp premium, your friend's agency is getting roughly $15,000. And if they have a normal split, and I'm not going to start a war of producers who might be hearing this and have them go back to their agency principal, because producer splits are like fingerprints. They're different everywhere you go, right?
Yeah.
But on average, 25% on a renewal book, that means your friend's making about $3,750 a year in commissions on the renewal of your account, even though you're paying $150. So I would suggest that you get out your checkbook and just write your friend a check for $3,750 for being your friend every year. Go ahead and let us take over the workers' comp. You've left them in the same financial position. We're going to come in and do the things we know how to do, and we're going to get you to where you're paying below $100,000. You keep your friend makes their money, you get your workers' comp situation fixed, and we win a new account. Does that sound reasonable to you? And it's like, holy crap, nobody ever said anything remotely close to me before, but it makes complete sense. And what happens is, most of the time when you get to the point where you say, why don't you just write your friend a check for $3,750? Well, why would I do that? I don't know. You're overpaying by 50 grand a year now. I just cut that by over 90%.
Yeah. I just saved you $47,000.
Yeah, no kidding, right? And so I think that a lot of times it comes down to comfort level, being in your role, having the at-bats, having the experience, and having the guts to just push the envelope a little bit. I've always looked at it from the perspective of, I'm in my worst case scenario with this account when I walk in the front door the first time. It can only get better from here. So if they're already not my client and I leave and they're still not my client, I didn't get any worse by being in there. I can only get better. And so I'm going to throw things out there that might push the envelope a little bit. But over my career, I've found that it works way more than it doesn't. I'm not going to say that every single time it hits. I'd be lying. But the reality is, most of the time, people throw an objection at you to get you off of them. And if you have an intelligent answer that you can come back with, you're going to catch them off guard. And then they're not going to have a way to answer you. They're not going to have a follow-up.
Yeah. And with the ever evolving comparison, right? Like a lot of companies start throwing you, but such and such now pays X, Y, and Z. I want to know how did they get there. Can you do the same for me, right? And the thing is that not one conversation, we all know not one conversation is the same. But I think something you do very well, and because you work as an advisor for your clients, you just came from an audit, right? Like, you're present. What is the biggest difference that it makes taking that time to pushing that envelope to educate this client and get them out of their comfort zone? Because I feel like most of it is that, no, I've been with my agent for 15 years, I am good. And and we as agents are fearful to push them out of their comfort zone, to confront them, because we don't want to show up as confrontational, and we end up losing the sale anyways. you know how do you manage that? How you get them out of that comfort zone?
So when you look at the architecture of a normal meeting, I'm gonna hit on a couple of different things. Number one, you mentioned I just came back from an audit, right? Think about what the term audit means to the average client. The first thing they think is IRS. Then the next thing they think is, oh, I'm going to owe money because my payroll was more than what I thought it was going to be. This wasn't even either one of those. This was an NCCI audit where they were coming in to look at class codes. And so my client immediately emails me when they get the message and they say, hey, we would really appreciate it if you would mind coming out, which I tell every one of my clients, look, if you ever get anything, please make sure I know about it. I will be there. Don't let me find out about it after the fact. So they did exactly as I'd asked. They sent it over. And you have to think about it for a second, because most of the time when somebody gets a letter for an NCCI audit, it's the first time they've ever gone through it. They don't know what to expect. They just automatically assume the worst and everything else. So at the very root of the reason of me being out there had nothing to do with the fact I've been through, dozens of NCCI audits. It's I was somebody who had experience dealing with the person that was going to be there in front of my client, and I was there to provide my client peace of mind, knowing that I had their back in the audit. Period. Like that's it. At the root level, I show up because I promised my client I'm going to show up. Any producer has the ability to do that. Not very many actually do it, which is
Mm-hmm.
insane to me. And that's because of the second reason. The second reason is it's a free education for you as a producer. Once you go through a couple of those and you know how they're going to go, then you can represent that stuff at the point of sale. Then you're going to see things that an incumbent agent may not see, that if you go in, you can use that to your advantage. So when you go into the meeting with that person and the objection that they throw up is, well, I've been with my existing agent for 15 years. A lot of people are going to be just like Chris Farley was in Tommy Boy for the first half of the movie, when everybody tells him no and he's like, all right, I'm out of here, see ya, and he just leaves, right? Whereas I'm going to look at somebody and say, you know what, that's awesome. I am so glad. That means my prospecting's dialed in. I'm looking for loyal clients just like you. And in fact, you remind me of the last 4 people that we've brought into the firm. All had long-term relationships, but we were able to come in and show them some things that they didn't get from a traditional insurance transaction that really moved the needle for them financially. So knowing that you're someone that's willing to stick around for 15 years makes your conversation with me that much more valuable. Lean into it, acknowledge it, accept it, but don't back away. Don't say, oh, well, we'll tread lightly, or wow, it sounds like you got a good thing going. You're never going to write business that way. You almost have to acknowledge it, but kind of ignore it at the same time and just keep pushing forward. But that's the truth. I don't want somebody who goes in and says, well, I've been with 4 agents in the last 5 years. That's a massive red flag for me. I'd much rather call on the person that's a little bit more difficult to get to, but they've been with the same place for 15 years. Number one, I know they have loyalty. Number two, I know there's highly likely to be dusty corners in their insurance program and in their risk management processes. So as long as I can get them to open up and start sharing with me, then I'm going to ultimately be able to have a realistic opportunity to close the deal. But when you know that somebody's been there for 15 years, you frame your questions in the conversation for the rest of the conversation differently. So to give you an example, let's say that we're going to just build off of what we've already talked about. Same account, 1.5 mod, 150,000 in premium. I'm doing the 1.5 thing. They've been with their agent for 15 years. And they tell me that now I know that they trust this person. They've been with them forever, but their mod's a 1.5 and the agent's not doing what they should be doing to help them or what they could be doing. And so I'm going to hit them with questions like, out of curiosity, I know your mod was a 137 last year and it went to a 1.5. When your agent came out 6 months before renewal to do your mid-year claims review and identify claims that were open with reserves that might have seemed to be inflated, what strategies did you discuss to close those claims so that it wouldn't make your mod go up coming into the new policy period? And they're like, my agent should have come out and had a mid-year claims review with me. Now, I didn't say anything at all negative about the agent. What I did was very matter-of-factly talk about something that's built into what we do here at Florida Risk and made them think, oh, well, this guy's talking about this like I should have it. I'm not getting that. Now you can just sit there and pick apart the rest of the conversation knowing, okay, we're going to get this person to the end. We're going to have the hook, and I'm at least going to be able to get the next meeting from them. Because my goal, and I think this is another place where a lot of producers make mistakes, my goal is never to close the meeting on the first appointment. I'm not saying that it can't be done, and I'm not saying that I haven't done it, but a win to me is leaving with the next appointment. So if I'm going into an introductory appointment and I'm getting all kinds of objections thrown at me, but I can leave with that person agreeing to allow me to do an experience mod audit or a vulnerability assessment on cyber, or come in and run the analytics on their fleet program to show them what a deductible might look like on their liability, or whatever else, anything that requires me to do work product, then go back and present it, that's a massive win for me. Now, if I go in and I do a mod audit for you, I'm going to tell you before I leave, here's what this is going to look like. I'm going to need your loss runs. I'm going to need your mod worksheet. I'm going to run it through my software. I'm going to come back with some reports. Now, look, I'm going to be honest with you. My report's like 45 pages long. So I'm going to leave it behind. We're only going to talk about 3 pages because those are the most impactful. I want you to have everything so you can see our work product. You know, this is something we would typically charge $2,500 or $3,000 for, but I'm willing to do it at no cost because I'm that confident we could help you. When I come back and present those findings, I want to be transparent. I'm going to ask you to fire Bob Smith and hire me. And I want to make sure I know the agent's name. I'm going to name the agent's name, and I want to see how they react. If they wince their eyes or they flinch a little bit when I say it, I know they're going to have a hard time firing Bob. If they say that's not a problem at all, we're paying $50,000 more. You've already identified that. Show me how you're going to fix it. And let's get this thing going. So I think that's a big deal too. You need to know who you're going up against. You need to be okay with using their name to monitor body language and things. But where producers fall off, specifically outside producers in the middle market, is they lose control of the conversation because they never set the rules of engagement that they can hold the prospect accountable to, period. They don't go in and say, here's what this process is going to look like. Here's what I need from you. Here's what I'm going to do for you. Here's when we're going to meet again. Are you able to provide me with the information that I need when I need it? The access to your people if I need him. And if they agree to all of those things, now you know what the rules of engagement are moving forward. But too many times, people don't ever do that. I was on a coaching call with a producer this week that was concerned he was going to get ghosted with a renewal proposal because he was only able to communicate with the lady over phone and email. And I said, okay, what expectations did you set with her when you originally talked to her? He goes, what do you mean? I said, did you tell her at any point that you wanted to come out and meet with her in person? Did you tell her that the final proposal was not just going to be emailed over, that you had things you needed to walk through and all of that? And he said, no, I missed that step. I said, then why are you complaining that this person's only communicating with you via email and phone? You gave them no direction to do anything otherwise, and that's the path of least resistance. So if you're a producer out there and you're not setting the rules of engagement when you're in a first appointment, you have no right to complain if they're doing anything other than what you expect when you get down the road because you didn't tell them what you wanted. People don't we were not born knowing how to sell insurance. We were not born knowing how to buy insurance. And the last time I checked, it's not an elective in high school or college titled how to procure insurance and risk management services for a company I might own or run one day, maybe. Like, that's not there. Kids don't know. They learn from us, and we go to the path of least resistance. We know if we get 100 quotes, or 100 submissions, we can get 50 quoted. 20 people will let us present, or 20 people will actually, get quoted at a reasonable amount. Some of them are kicked out. 10 will let us present. 2 of them will buy from us. So we're just going to go get 100 submissions, and we know that we'll bind 2 out of every 100. And we're going to work our tails off every single day. I don't normally name names, but Liberty Mutual is a great example. When they came into the agency, they started throwing all these metrics out. And I know that you've worked with them in the past. Anybody who has knows how they operate. And this is not me throwing shade at them, but they came in and said, we need this many submissions, this many quote to the submission to quote to bind, and said all that. And I said, I'm not your guy. Like, I'm not the agency that you want. I'm never going to give you 100 submissions in a month so that we can bind 2. I'm going to give you 2 or 3, and we're going to bind 2 or 3. Like, that's how we work. So I think that's another thing that producers just don't realize is, quit trying to take the path of least resistance to quote. It's never going to work for you. The number one thing that I learned early on in my career, and it's been the way I've sold, I'm not going to say for all 20 years, but at least for the last 18 or 18 and a half, is you have to know how to get hired before the insurance transaction ever happens. If you hang your hat on getting a quote that you can hope will be good enough for you to go back and sell based on price, you are going to lose more than you're going to win every day, every week, every year. But if you can figure out what's really driving the rate and show that you understand that problem for that industry and that you have a solution that can fix it, and that will save them money, not just in premium, but in other costs that agents don't identify because it's not payrolls by class code, you're going to win every time. So when we go in and do that mod audit, it may be 5 months before the workers' comp renewal. A lot of agents aren't going to do anything with the account because you can't letter it midterm. You're not going to get paid on it. I'm going to go ahead and start getting to work. If I need to put return to work in or light duty, I'm going to have that prospect sign a letter of engagement. Absolutely worthless in the insurance marketplace. I can't do anything with it, but it's a psychological outward moment where they sign a document saying, we have made the conscious decision to hire David and Florida Risk Partners to handle our insurance and risk management needs moving forward. And it's got a little more language in it than that. But if I can get a letter of engagement signed, just like you would sign with an accountant or an attorney, I'm now comfortable doing work ahead of renewal, knowing that when renewal comes, we will handle the renewal negotiation and placement and ultimately get the commission to pay for the work that we've done. And if I can do that, that's the easiest thing in the world, because when I talk to an underwriter, my client isn't the decision maker anymore. I am. I've already been hired. I don't have to have my client make a decision on insurance to determine whether or not I got the job. I got the job. My job is to negotiate and place their insurance coverage. So when I'm going back and forth and negotiating with underwriters and they say, well, take this to your client, I don't need to. I need you to get to your best number. And here are the endorsements we need to have. And I want to make sure that we have that. But if you can get to this, I know that I can give you the bind order. How do you know you can do that? Because I'm the one making the decision what I'm going to go present. And they are going to take me at my word because they hired me for my advice, not because I have an insurance license, period. I had the craziest conversation just this week. I brought on a big contractor down in Boca, big company. It's about $100 million a year in sales. And the thing was an absolute train wreck, the way it was written. It blew my mind that it was even like this. But this is a company that was pushing $100 million a year in sales, and it was written on a BOP. Okay, $7,500 premium on just the BOP is what they paid, and they were over $90 million a year in sales last year. And I looked at it. The reason I got into the account, one of the very first things we talked about was relationship. I've got a relationship with a company that does fractional CFO work, and the guy that owns the company is my number one referral partner. Anytime they go into a new engagement, they call me in to do the due diligence on the insurance side. They hand over everything I need. I can help them put programs in place and everything else. And they know the way I get compensated is to place the insurance. So he picked up the phone and called me. Never forget it. We have a standing joke that he literally calls me with a new lead every single time I'm in Key West. This last weekend, when I was down there, is the first time ever that he hasn't called me with a lead while I was there. So I called him and asked him if he had anything for me just to kid with him. But he called me. I was frying bacon and eggs for Ethan and Caroline on spring break. And I answer the phone. He's like, David, got an issue, need your help. And I said, okay. I said, what you got? He goes, I'm going to send you everything. Take a look at it. But I've got this. It's on a short, on a somewhat short leash. I need you to help me with it. And so I said, who is it? He said, you are. He goes, you know. And I said, well, no. What do you mean I know? He said, you know. And I said, who is it? And he named the account. And it's an account that I actually I cut the first meeting short 3 years ago and walked out. And I think that's the reason I'm telling this story is that's another important lesson for new producers. I walked in, I used my value proposition. The decision maker at the time was not receptive to what we wanted to do. Everything was price oriented. And I said, look, I'd be a fool to come in here and tell you that you're not running a successful business because by all accounts on paper you are. I just know this isn't going to be a realistic opportunity for me and a good relationship moving forward because there's just too much of a gap in our business philosophy. And I didn't even know how much he was paying at this point. I didn't look at the insurance or any of that. I knew it was a big company. I knew they had over 100 vehicles, but I had the guts to stick to my guns and say, you're not my ideal prospect. You're not interested in the risk management of things. You're not interested in scaling profitably. That's really where I hang my hat. So rather than us waste our time, let's just kill the meeting. And I said, well, I got to tell you, man, I said, I want to help you, but he goes, no, you don't need to worry about it. I already talked to the owner. He's 100% on board. He said, you gave him a wake-up call when you walked out 3 years ago, and he needs to do all of this the right way. Now, this is a company that's working on scaling. They build charging stations for Teslas. They have a nice contract with Lowe's and Home Depot. Guess what? You don't get the endorsements you need to have those types of contracts when you're on a BOP, and they knew that. I told him up front, I said, listen, I said, for the umbrella and the general liability alone, for you to be in compliance with your contract, you're probably looking at $250,000 to $300,000 a year. I'm just giving you my best guess. It could be more, it could be less, but I have a feeling it's going to be $250,000 to $300,000. And I said, I just need to know that you're not going to have an issue going back to the owner. And my guy said, I'm the decision maker. I understand exactly what it's going to cost. And we also understand that in order for us to go above 100 million and beyond, we need to be able to have an insurance program that's going to allow us to grow. And we need to have the processes and procedures to make sure we're growing profitably. So I said, great. A lot of people probably would never even have said, oh, it's going to be $250,000 to $300,000 because they would be afraid they would lose the deal on the front end. And when you understand that you have to stick to your value proposition and who you are, it's not a difficult decision. You either fit or you don't. If I would have stayed in and taken that account, what would have happened? I would have argued with them consistently. I never would have gotten anything done that really needed to be done. Their results would have been as bad or worse. But the most important thing that a producer needs to understand, I would have diminished the value proposition to every other account in my book of business that followed the way we do business and let us do things our way. So all of that worked out. Now I had to go to the carrier. And I went to the carrier to say, here's where we're at. And they want target premium, historical premium, all of that. And I said, it's irrelevant. Well, no, it's not irrelevant to us because we're going to have to get this approved by the branch manager and send it to corporate. And they said, we really just we think this thing's going to come in between $250,000 and $300,000. And I'm like, that's exactly what I thought. And they said, but we want to make sure you can close it. And I said, look, man, this is the first deal that, this is a newer underwriter to us. I said, this is the first deal we've worked on together. So I know you don't understand our process. And I know that you're used to working with agents that tell you all kinds of stuff. I said, this deal was closed before I ever brought it to you. I've already talked to the client. He's like, I need my reassurances. So you know what I did? I sent him the email where I told my client, this is going to be 250 to 300. I need to make sure you're going to be able to sell this to management. And it was date and time stamped 2 weeks before he ever asked the question. And I sent it over and I said, here's your reassurances. I hope we don't have to go through this again moving forward. So boom, looks at it, sees that the client's on board, gets it approved. And we ended up bringing it on board for 4-1 at $387,000 in premium. And I don't share that because of the number of premium for me to brag. Truthfully, I write accounts much larger than that, and I write plenty that are smaller than that. I'm only sharing that because to go from 7,500 to 387,000 in premium for those lines of coverage, they're not buying on price. There's no way they were buying on price.
So you deal with a lot of producers, and I think you hit on something very important that it's shifting right now, right? Because I feel underwriting is absolutely making our jobs a lot more difficult than they need to be. And a lot of producers do not have the, I wouldn't say the capacity, but they don't have that forward attitude that sometimes we need to have in order to get the things that we need for our clients. And companies and insurance companies are getting tougher to deal with because of, different risk, increase of losses, and things like that. In your sessions, because I know you have the boot camps, you have Producers in Paradise, in the sessions that you have run through the years, do you see anything different on the needs of the producers from the negotiation standpoint? Because I feel that a lot of things can be changing. Technology can be changing, systems can be changing, how we introduce those things to our work on a daily basis, they can change and it's okay. But that part of agent versus insurance versus client, that communication, that negotiation, do you feel that you spend most of your time with your producers on that, or do you spend your time with your producers on other things? Is that consistent across everybody that you coach on?
Here's the one thing that I would tell you. This is like snowflakes, right? Every producer is different. There's a few comments that I'm going to make. I'm sure that I'm going to irritate some people with some of this. I'm okay with that. It won't be the first time. We got a lot of people walking around that are producer by title only, period. They're not a producer. Somebody told them they were, and they told them they needed to go out and write business. But the reality is, if you were to do a personality profile on them and you look at their numbers and their behaviors, they're not a producer. They may be a really good inside salesperson. They may be an account manager, but it is a very, very defined set of characteristics you have to be a successful producer. I don't blame the producer for that. I blame the agency for that, and I blame the industry for that, because you don't have what I would consider purebred producers just growing off of trees walking around. They're 1 in 100 if you're lucky. Agencies are dying for revenue in production, so they end up hiring whoever walks in the door that's got a good story, and they think they can make something of them. They underpay them. They're overbearing in terms of what they expect. They don't give them the training and support they need, and in 6 months they're doing something else because it was a failure, and it's always the producer's fault. No, it's the agency's fault and the industry's fault for not having the infrastructure in place or the processes in their hiring to do the profiling and all the things you need to do to identify, yes, this person is a great candidate for this job. So a lot of the reason that you see people spending time doing things that they shouldn't be doing, or that they're just not effective at doing, isn't really their fault. It's that they were hired and took a job that they really shouldn't have had to begin with, because it's just not in their DNA. The second piece of that is, I think it's really important that producers understand that anytime you have a problem with an account, whether it's somebody you're going to market for, or a renewal, or somebody who's not adopting your recommendations over the course of the year, you can trace all of that back to really bad prospecting. They didn't identify their ideal client profile. They didn't stick to it. They let somebody come in that wasn't part of what they originally set out to do. That person drains all their time, isn't really agreeable to do anything they want them to do. And now they waste a bunch of time having to go back and forth. It's a pain to deal with the carrier. It's a pain to deal with the client. People don't give you the information you need. And if you look back at it and say, here's 5 different red flags I should have picked up on through prospecting, research, and the first appointment. I'm going to take a first appointment with everybody. I don't take a second appointment with everybody. Sometimes that's by their design. Sometimes it's by mine. But the real strength in being a producer and understanding how to get the most out of everything you do starts with how you prospect. And that goes not just to the ideal client profile, but all the way down to how do you block your calendar every day.
Yeah. Yeah. And that goes very well with, a lot of agencies and now bigger aggregators and corporations, and the big push from all of them, especially in this year, and coming years, is organic growth, right? Let's hire good producers and let's focus on organic growth. But that's great, said and done. And it's great said, but it's not easily done, right?
Well, you know what's happening, right? You've seen all the stuff that's going on with Howden.
Yeah.
That's exactly what Howden is doing right now. They have cracked the code. Whether we agree with what they're doing or not is not on the table. What they're doing is what we're focusing on, and they're literally going in, willfully hiring people that have huge books of business, huge teams that are underneath them, and they have figured out that it's cheaper for them to fight it out in court than it is to go try and find somebody to come in and do it organically. And so they're calling it organic growth, but they're really going in and just buying all this business cheaper than they would pay in a multiple if it was an acquisition, because they're literally just hiring the people, paying them their salaries, and calling it a day. It's nuts to watch how it happens, but this is going to change. You watch. This is going to change the way everything happens moving forward.
It is a change. So how do you perceive? I know you're doing an amazing job, getting all this training out to a lot of agents out there. And a good testament to that is your own son, how he has been able to learn so much from you. And
that door swings both ways. That's a learning experience on both ends, I can promise you.
Because he is a new generation that we are not, at least I feel that I am now getting prepared to kind of, learning how they work, learning how everything is different with them, right? But then it kind of gives us a little hope that they are moldable. We can get this done with the right approach and with the right tools. So, there is a big fight right now in the industry for the producer that it's a hunter that can bring that organic growth, that is experience, because we don't have a lot of time to focus on the other side. But from your experience now, what do we need to do differently in order to bring this new generation in, that in reality is where we should be spending a lot of our time on?
You just let the secret out. I mean, that is the secret, right? Our industry is full of awesome people, but it's also full of very stubborn people who are set in their ways in many cases. Mm-hmm. And I think the biggest risk that a legacy agency principal has right now is the way they've always done things, period. You cannot be set in your ways. You can't be set in the technology, the processes, or any of it. And most importantly, you cannot allow yourself to become offended when people question the status quo. So I can tell you, I'm a very strong personality. I am set in my ways to some degree, but I'm also self-aware enough to know that I don't think like my 23-year-old son does. He's 30 years younger than me. He grew up in a completely different time, completely different tools, completely different outlook on life. I have a fundamental belief that we have 4 or 5 years to raise our kids. You can establish their moral compass in the 4 to 5 years before they leave to go to kindergarten. Once they leave to go to school, they are going to be influenced by the public school system or whatever school they're at for the next 12 years of their life. and then they're going to leave, go to college, and then they're going to be adults. So if you don't get it right in the first 4 to 5 years, I'm not saying you can't course correct, but it becomes really difficult to change things at that point because your vote doesn't carry nearly the weight that it did before. And so I think that's one thing is, with Grayson, he had a very structured childhood. We invested in him with our time, and we went and did things and all of that. So, the relationship was there originally. That's fine, but I think that's the next piece is you think about what it's like for a father and a son to work together. I've been in that role when I worked with my dad, and it did not go well at all. It was a really bad experience. And I think that because of that, it became a really good experience for Grayson because I don't like to lose. And I was not going to allow him to come into the agency and then I end up running him out of the industry or whatever else. With his story specifically, the very first thing that happened is, number one, I didn't encourage it. I didn't ask him. I never floated it. It was never my idea. He came to me and he said, Dad, I really would like to think about what it would look like for me to come work with you at the agency. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I maybe didn't tear up a little bit and cheer on the inside because why wouldn't I want to have him with me every day? We have an excellent relationship. I do with all my kids. And so I was proud of that, but I asked him, I said, why? And then I wanted to hear why he wanted to do it. And he said, well, to be honest with you, Dad, he said, you've always been there. He said, when we needed a little league coach or the team wasn't going to be able to play, you stepped up and coached Little League. You were at my practices. You were at my games. We've taken really good trips as a family for vacation, and I've got lifelong memories, and I want to be able to replicate that for my family when I have one. And I'm like, man, I was getting it right and didn't even realize it. And here I told him, and I said, look, man, I said, the reality is if you would have come in here and said, because of the money, I wouldn't have let you have the opportunity. I said, every reason you told me you wanted to do this is the right reason. So let's figure out what that looks like. And so then it got into, well, you need to go work at Publix for 2 years so that you can have a customer service job and learn how to deal with the public at their absolute worst. I came from the grocery industry, so I'm partial to it. If you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. So he went and he worked at Publix for 2 years, and he came back to him and he said, I'm ready to go. And I said, good. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to edit podcasts. You're going to edit videos. You're going to put blog posts together. You're going to learn search engine optimization, and you're going to do all of this stuff for a year. And I want you to use all of my stuff as the guinea pig because I'm not going to get mad at you. I can teach you, but I want you to get this dialed in. I said, my only rule is you have to do it for an entire year. I'm not going to let you move around just because you get bored or whatever else. A month in, he's like, Dad, I got this figured out already. Grayson, I told you, a year. Another month later, Dad, I've been doing it 2 months. This is not rocket science. Grayson, this is twice now. I told you a year. Don't ask me again. About 2 months after that, we were going out to the agency success conference out in Phoenix. He's at the registration table in front of me, and I hear Chris Langell ask him what it's like. Chris Langell was sitting there. He's like, hey, what's it like working with your dad? Grayson didn't realize I was within earshot. I was behind him. He's like, oh, man. He goes, I got to tell you, he goes, it's awesome. I really enjoy it. I'm editing these videos, these podcasts, doing these blog posts. He said, I am learning everything I need to know to be a successful producer because I hear my dad interview all these successful producers. He said, when it's time for me to go out, I'm going to know all the tricks. And I tapped him on the shoulder and I said, that's because your old man grew up watching The Karate Kid and Mr. Miyagi. This is wax on, wax off insurance style. And all of a sudden, he figured out there's a method to the old man's madness. And guess what? It worked. But here's the thing. You have to be willing to ask for feedback, which many agency principals won't. But then, even if they do, you have to be willing to accept feedback in an unbiased way and not hold it against the person who gave you. You truly have to have the mindset of, I need every ounce of feedback I can get so that I can be the best I can be, so that the agency can be the best that it can be for everybody who's here. And if you're not willing to do that, it's going to be really, really difficult for you to navigate the waters moving forward. I'm going to give you guys a really good example. Jason is in personal lines and absolutely crushing it. I hate personal lines. I've never wanted anything to do with it. I've been very vocal about it. I lack the mental maturity of being on the phone with a CFO that pays us $1,000 a year in commissions. And my phone rings and it's Mrs. Jenkins, and she's pissed off that her homeowners went up $10 a month, wants me to drop everything I'm doing, shop every market, and get back to her. Or she's going to go find somebody who can save her money. I'm likely to tell Mrs. Jones Walmart's hiring greeters and she could go make enough money in a part-time job to cover the $10 a month. My time's more valuable than shopping around for $10 a month. We would have no personal lines clients if I ran personal lines. He has the patience to do it. But when we brought personal lines in, we had all kinds of automations and everything that we needed to do. And we've done a really good job with top of funnel. We have a lot of inbound that comes in every day. We average anywhere between 30 and 50 inbound leads for personal lines a day. And he's the only person who manages them. We're a one-person shop. So the automations have to be there with text and email and having an organized CRM system, and then all of the other tools that we use. And so one of the tools we use is Canopy Connect, specifically because the whole idea was, man, if we can just get them to upload their stuff into the secure document portal, we can pull the data, and that's going to save us a ton of time. And so my idea was, we're just going to have Canopy Connect be the way we get this. And if they give it to us, great. If they don't, then they shouldn't be our client. What a horrible decision that I made, right? Because who am I to tell somebody how they should do business with us, other than here are options for you to pick from, which way is the best, not force them into a pigeonhole. This is the only way. And so we found out we weren't getting adoption from segments of the population. Some of the older people just aren't comfortable using Canopy Connect. They think it's going to strip government secrets or something. So, we operated that way, and we weren't getting enough of the yield because we weren't getting past the first stage. And so Grayson actually sent me a text one weekend when I was out, and he said, Dad, I think we need to try something. He said, I think we need to give the people options so that when they fill the form out and hit submit, that text message, instead of saying, here's the link to our secure document portal, he said, what if we were to say, how would you like to engage with us? Type 1 to use our secure document portal, type 2 to receive an email with the list of questions we may have, and type 3 and some suggested times if you'd like a phone call. I'm like, sounds reasonable. Let's try it and see what happens. So we built the automation. If they want to use the document portal, it's automatic. If they want an email, they type 2. The CRM automatically sends them the email with the link to the intake form. And if they type 3, then we send them a link or an email with a calendar link, or we just start going back and forth on text for the right time. Guess what? Engagement shot through the roof. Like, it was almost instantaneous. We went from having maybe 10% of the people actually comply to where it was well over 50% were engaging at this point. The only reason I say that is because I was the problem, right? I was the issue with, this is how we're going to do it, because this is how I want us to do it. And I was humble enough and open enough to the feedback for him to come back and say, this is really maybe a better way to do it. Let's try it, right? I give him a lot of credit. That's gutsy. I'm your dad and your boss. Now you're going to come to me and push back and say, I think we need to do it a different way because what you're doing isn't working. But if you have the kind of relationship where everybody's going after the same common goal, it doesn't matter where you are in the pecking order. If you're the problem, you have to be open to admit that and be willing to fix whatever you need to fix to make the problem go away. And that, I think, is the biggest problem we're going to face as an industry, is we have people who are my age and older that aren't willing to take advice from a younger generation. I'm here to tell you, if you're not getting advice from the younger generation on digital marketing, social marketing on Instagram and TikTok, and building your brand there, some of the technology things that they're aware of that we have no idea even exist, you are going to render yourself extinct in the worst case scenario, or you're going to render your valuation to be much lower than what it could be, because you're going to be competing in the acquisition marketplace with firms who have it dialed in and they did things the way that I just outlined. If we only did things the way they've always been done, we would still not have wheels. We wouldn't have fire. I would be going out and clubbing animals and dragging them back to the cage. This is just a natural part of our evolution. And the one thing that ruins it is human pride. And that's easy. If you can recognize that's the issue and you're adult enough to check that at the door, the rest is easy.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and I think where we are going, it is important to have that flexibility, not just because of the technology, but also because new generations that are coming up, they're always looking into how to actually utilize their time more efficiently and maximize their time to do the things that they value doing. So it's not only a shift in terms of how we work, but also a shift into how they see, right, the outcomes of their life. Like for us, I think our generations are like, we work our ass off until we can no more, because that's the way that you grow, and that's the way, and we will make 700 sacrifices because that's the way it should be done, and that's how I show up, and that's the value that I bring. Versus when I talk to my daughter, and probably, I don't know, maybe Grayson has the same mentality. She's like, "Oh, mom, I'm gonna do everything I need to do, but I need my time to do this and this and this, because that's what's valuable to me, regardless of what anybody is paying me. I am not compromising this, and that." And that's very different from how we grew up into business. I don't know if you had the same experience.
No,
And
it
mine,
actually very similar. You know,
mine is 14 years old.
well, the ladies are always more advanced than the men anyhow. We're just big dumb animals and we understand that. But I think that the thing that makes it a little bit more complex is everything that I do is an example to not just him but my other three kids. And I'm not just an example of a boss or even a dad. I'm an example of how they're going to end up turning out if they're paying attention to what I'm doing. So I take that role very, very seriously and want to make sure that I'm setting Grayson up to when he has an issue, like it has to face it with one of his kids or whatever. He's going to think back and say, I remember when this happened and how dad dealt with it, and I want it to be a positive experience from him. So everything that I do, I want that to be a reflection of my sort of dual role, agency principal, but also dad. So it's fun. I wouldn't trade it for anything. People say all the time, "Oh, you don't mix business and family." That's because you don't know how to do it. The best day of my life will happen when Andrea comes in and becomes the COO of the agency, and that we can work side by side to finish building this thing out and ultimately cash our check and leave one day. And I've had a
What do
number
you
of my
mean?
friends tell me I'm an idiot for that.
Not
Why would they say, why would you do that? Why would you bring your wife in? You guys have such a great relationship. Don't ruin it. Don't risk it. And I said, well, the problem is you don't understand that we've already built like 3 companies together in different platforms and different industries. And the odd man out is us not working together right now. We are perfect complements to each other. Everywhere I'm weak, she's strong. We know how to communicate. We literally could just come in and just like that, turn things around anywhere we would go because we're that good together. And so maybe I'm unique in the fact that I can work with family side by side and not have it affect a professional or a familial relationship. But I honestly think it just all goes back to we should be constantly learning, humble enough to know we don't know everything, and be willing to take advice and feedback from people. And I don't put an age bracket on that. It could be older, younger, same age, in between, but get feedback, because the one thing that's consistent in all of that is nobody has the same life experiences as anybody else. So the advice you get can come from a completely different perspective.
That's right. Well, thank you, David, so much. I think, this is just a piece, guys, of what David actually,
We could have gone for 5 hours.
this is a piece of what David, does for everybody else. You have Producers in Paradise coming, and you have the boot camps coming, and you just issue a new series of your podcast and a book. So we will be sharing all that good stuff with everyone there. But I really always appreciate, you taking the time and your passion, because I feel I always learn something new every time I talk to you. And it's just refreshing to have these conversations, even though they might be around the same topics, but every single time it's different and it hits differently. And I hope that it did the same for anyone listening today.
Absolutely. I am thankful you gave me the opportunity to come chat with you. We don't do it nearly enough.
We don't, but we will. We
You've been a
will.
little busy.
I've been a little busy, yes. It was a year, but I am definitely coming back. Like I share with you, we just went through the acquisition of the agency. We had a very busy 14 months that we were working on a ton of projects and things that needed to get off the ground and close. So I just closed the biggest deal of my career, which is awesome.
Go for it.
So
Awesome. That's great.
now I'm just gonna try to see how we do, better with commercial and killing it with commercial.
There
So
you go.
we'll see.
There you go. Go get it.
We'll see. So thank you, David, for your time today. And for those listening, this was Monica Adwani and David Carothers, and we'll see you on the next episode.